Yeah, it's not in the.
No, it's not.
It is.
Oh, it is.
It's under the folder NBCJMA.
Not in Twitter.
Alright,
Okay, so let me start my introductions. My name is Warren Gromley. I am the Special Projects Manager for Newtown Sewer. I've been with the authority for over 40+ years. To my left, we have Theresa Funk, who is our engineer in-house and who is also involved in all of the wastewater treatment plant. Again, cost analysis and so forth. And next to her is Mike Mendino. Mike is the new manager for the sewer authority. Mike's been with us for over 28 years. So I'd like to begin just with a brief history. And the authority was incorporated back in 1960 with the borough and the township. What started was the borough needed the, because of the failing systems, needed public sewer. So at the request of the borough and the township, they formed the jointure, which takes care of the township and the borough only. We had back then roughly 1,200 customers. And due to the developer growth, one would be in 1984, the biggest Newtown grant, which is Golden Acres. That was 1,751 homes. Took about 12, 14 years to finish. And from there on, we just grew. And through them years, all the infrastructure that you see here, mostly all of the infrastructure is paid for by developers. Okay, so in other words, you started a development, we reviewed the plans, Janet Fleming, just to let you know too, our engineers have been with us since 1960. So they are very familiar with the whole entire system of the sewer authority. So this is the system, sanitary sewer system, manholes, force mains, and sewer lines. And as you can see, we have roughly 103 miles of sewer. We have 5 pump stations and roughly 9,000 customers, all maintained by the sewer authority staff. The wastewater treatment plant that we had was in 1964, operated, and it was decommissioned in 1988, which is down at the very bottom of this map. And everything that you see is in gray is all gravity fed to that point, and the 2 outer pieces are where the 5 pump stations reside. So we decommissioned that plant in 1988 because of the cost and the increased regulations. So we participated in the regional authority, and that is how we got to Bucks County Water and Sewer. So the regional system, which is the map, Newtown Sewer Authority, we take care of all the collection for the borough and the township, and Bucks County interceptors convey the flow from 13 municipalities to a total road pump station. And Bucks has 2 interceptors. I will look at that just so you would have an idea. There is one which is to this side, picks up the park and Newtown Crossing, and that is called the Chamonix interceptor. And that has been around for about 60 years now. So the Chamonix interceptor takes care of the left side of the township and everything going down through to Levittown and so on down to Bristol. The next would be, the next is the Fort Creek interceptor. The Fort Creek interceptor, if you're familiar with the old Lockheed Martin site, that is right here. So we have the Fort Creek interceptor, which is also owned by Bucks County, and that picks up a portion of Newtown and brings it to the Fort Creek interceptor, which flows into the Chamonix, which flows to Philly. So, with that being said, Newtown Sewer Authority is collection. Bucks here and here is conveyance. Philadelphia is treatment. All sanitary sewer from Northampton all the way down to Bristol all go to Philadelphia for treatment through a conveyance line owned by Bucks County Water and Sewer. So if anybody has any questions, I'm gonna move on to the next page. I know it's a lot of information, but okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. The next thing is the components of rates. So the operating costs, other than Bucks County Water and Sewer, we have the staff, utility, maintenance, equipment, and service contracts. We also, the Bucks County conveyance charges are approximately 70% of our operating budget. Bucks County charges include treatment plant charges from Philadelphia. And also, we also have to have reserved for capital projects. I did Knobville last year, or during COVID, I'm sorry. That was a full replacement, that was $2 million. We now have Penn's Commons on the books right now, to do that as well. And then also we have TVing and so forth that we're doing in other developments, to, I guess, find the, where we have issues, if any, and then that'll be the next capital projects, on the books. So, going forward, our 2024 budget totaling $5,376,800. That budgeted, part of that budgeted expense is Bucks County Water and Sewer at $3,780,000. So that's 7% of our budget. And to review the historic payments to Bucks, from 22 to 2012, the unit costs per 1,000 gallons increased at an average rate of 9.5 annually. 23 to 2019, the unit costs increased at an average rate of 1.4 annually. And then overall average annual increase in unit cost from 2001 to 2019 was 6.2%. Now, that numbers changed because there was lack of maintenance and management, and that rate credit, there was a rate credit that Northampton pursued in a lawsuit against Bucks County. Bucks County lost that suit, and they were found guilty of overcharging on flows to all 13 municipalities and were ordered to pay back. So, and that wasn't the first time for Bucks. It's been a familiar thing over the years. So why is the authority pursuing the wastewater treatment? Well, first of all, in 22, Bucks came up to very close to selling 1.1 billion to Aqua. The rate impact of all the customers, including municipal entities connected to the regional system, would have been significant. In some cases, they have went up 62 to 74%. Limerick, when they bought Limerick, they went up to like 75% increase because they are for profit. They are not for nonprofit. So it is, some business making money. Cost of the improvements to Aqua-owned facilities will be allocated to all customers, even those who do not benefit from the improvements, which would be us. When the purchase negotiations between Bucks and Aqua were suspended, Bucks were on record to say that their system required millions of dollars of capital improvements. So here's where we're getting the increases. So let's just say with Aqua doing their due diligence, they had to know what they were looking at by walking in there as far as repairs and so on. Bucks had an idea, they didn't have a full idea, but there were places where they had many, many issues for years. So right off from the start, they had to run, and these had to be done. And I guess Aqua identified a lot of them walking in and also said that because of this, the mandates by DEP to make these repairs is going to cost money. And all of this would be spread out over all the users. So it would be all 13 municipalities, and accordingly, it would be Newtown as well. The other thing was that don't think Aqua is gone, because they're definitely going to come back and make another offer to Bucks. So, I mean, that is not out of the picture whatsoever. Even though the commissioners did put a squash to it, still, business is business. The other thing is the land availability came to us for a site for the wastewater treatment and was identified as little or hardly any impact to surrounding people, surrounding developments and so forth. The property was acquired by us by eminent domain. This board is very conscientious about the money and what its costs are, and looking at it all throughout this whole project. We did purchase that land. We had an appraisal done, and we purchased it for millions less than what we were given as far as a number. So, throughout this whole process, the board is very conscientious about that and about the community. It's always been about the community, the ratepayers, and doing the right thing. And this, when you come down to it and you look through the numbers, this is the right thing. But it's not always easy to do the right thing.
Take it from there?
Yeah.
Okay. There's some analytics I wanted to include because I think it's a lot to get your brain around. As Warren said, the $1.1 billion number, when that came to the county, it really gave a lot of people pause, especially publicly owned systems that own their own system. And really, the board felt it very important to evaluate the impacts of really not having control of what happens to our flow and what it costs once it leaves the limits of Newtown Borough and Newtown Township. So that was probably the end of 2022. We were charged as a group with really doing a thorough evaluation of, look, what has Bucks cost us over the years? And based on what they have cost us, how can we realistically project that forward and do a reasonable comparison of what our options might be? So again, if you look at the first graph there, it's just a visual to give you a sense of what Warren spoke to. The average increase in Bucks costs for the last 20 years, 6.4%. Obviously, inflation's been a little higher recently, but if you look at that on a 20-year total, that is above the rate of inflation. The average inflation over a 20-year average is a lot closer to between 2 and 3%. If you look at the next graph quickly, again, it shows that increase, and that's the increase in unit cost, which means dollars per 1,000 gallons. That's how the authority is billed on their flow that they send to Bucks, a certain rate per 1,000 gallons. So that shows the increase in the rate over the last 20 years, the blue line, and the red line shows Newtown's flow. So that line's pretty flat. So that, as many of you have probably lived here a lot of your lives, and you know that although Newtown experienced great growth in the township area in the 80s and 90s, for the last 20 years, it's been pretty flat, which shows by your sewage flows. They really have not increased at all on an average basis, although costs definitely have. So our charge was to try and get our brains around what a new wastewater treatment plant would cost reasonably and project that cost over the life of what would ultimately be a debt service to pay for a big capital expense, and compare that to reasonable projections of what staying with Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority would cost the authority and ultimately its ratepayers. So the next sheet shows the assumptions that we made. Obviously, forecasting is hard, and forecasting 30 years is even harder, but we think we have some good numbers. We did a budget level cost estimate and came up with a new wastewater treatment plant cost of $128 million, which includes the cost of the land that Warren spoke to. It obviously includes construction costs, and then all soft costs associated with the project, engineering, legal, administrative, finance costs. And then we have a 15% contingency in there, which, early in a project, you kind of need a bigger contingency. Obviously, as we move forward, we'll drill down details and hopefully be able to drill down these estimates a little better. When we did the cost comparison, we knew we were going to have to project rate increases. At the end of the day, the cost of Water and sewer utilities, which if you compare them to any other utility are the cheapest, always have been. The cost of providing those services has increased across the board. As Warren said, some of the infrastructure in the system's 60 years old. The useful life of infrastructure in sewer and water, depending on what it is, 50 to 75 years old. So the cost of these services is going up, honestly, regardless of what happens from here. So you have to kind of analyze, what can I control in terms of costs in the long term, and what can I not control? So in order to do, project a balanced budget over the years and compare the costs of a new wastewater treatment plant to Bucks, these are the assumptions that we made. We did project increases in both cases, whether the treatment plant's built or whether we stay with Bucks. We suspect rate increases. One, obviously, many people here may have letters from the authority. One is being initiated in January 1st, partially due to just increased operating costs associated with the authority. Bucks, I think Warren pointed out that in that 20 years, there was a 9.5% average for a period of time and then a 1.4% average. That 1.4% average is over the last 10 years. And that gives you pause because that can't be sustained. That makes you feel like there's probably rate increases coming from Bucks in the short term. And the combination of the information that came out from the potential aqua sale indicated hundreds of millions of dollars needed in maintenance and repair of the cost system. So the next graph shows the cost comparison of what we believe right now, staying with the regional system versus building a new treatment plant. And the red line is staying with the regional system, and the blue line is a treatment plant. I also think it's important to, I didn't show it in the graphs, but if you look back on history, we also looked at the authority's historical operating costs and where the cost increase from Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority averaged 6.4% over 30 years. The authorities averaged somewhere between 2 and 3. So the authority, having control of your own operating costs and owning them a little more, I think, speaks to itself. They've done it they've been very fiscally responsible with the assets. So, I think I want to explain a little bit that little hump in the blue line there, which is in years like 3 to 5. What that represents is probably the trickiest part of this project. Obviously, if they were to take on this project, they would have to go out for some type of financing to pay the construction costs and begin to pay debt service during construction of the treatment plant. A project this size, the construction is probably anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 years to construct a project of this magnitude. While they're in construction, they have to stay with Bucks County Water. You need somewhere to send your sewage flows. So that hump really represents having to pay Bucks and having to pay the debt service on the authority. So that's the reason for that, if that looks kind of funny. And then obviously once construction's down and you can disconnect from the Bucks system, you realize the savings somewhere on the order of $5 million a year in your annual budget. And then the next graph there is a rate comparison. As I said, we predict rates are going to go up. It's just how much, honestly. Bucks has not increased rates in the last 2022, since 2022. Like I said, we also we're not really only in on what's going on in Philadelphia either, but I don't think everybody knows their infrastructure is aging. They have long-term pollution control plans associated with their treatment plants that they need to. So we're worried about pass-through of those Philadelphia costs to Bucks, which eventually make their way back to the authority. So again, these comparisons are really, the rate projection is really rate based on history. If Bucks increases its rates, its costs increase the same way they did the last 20 years, this is what we're looking at for the next 30, that purple line. Whereas the green line, again, initially a higher cost, but somewhere around years 7 to 10 to 12, we think a break-even point on an asset that could feasibly last 50 to 100 years, really. Probably 100 years, you would just need to obviously invest in it at some, some maintenance upgrade 50 years in. you know, the next slide just shows, you know, what has the authority done and where they are now. We have been in communication with the Department of Environmental Protection and requested discharge limits for 2 potential discharge locations. If the plant were being constructed, one would be in Poor Creek, just adjacent to the land that was cited. And the second one, yeah, Lower Silver Lake Road, right next to the new Wawa. And the second one would be at the location of the former plant discharge that Warren spoke to. One goes to Poor Creek, one goes to Neshaminy Creek. Again, I want to get into the technical details. There's some science that you evaluate in terms of what your discharge criteria is and providing the highest quality effluent from your treatment plant that you can. So those things still need to be evaluated a little bit. We did collect, sampling to characterize the wastewater and figure out what treatment options would be, and that's how we got to those cost estimates. We did a flow analysis of the last 5 years of flow to try and see what the capacity of a new plant would need to be. And again, evaluated treatment alternatives. The really nice part about 2024 and designing a treatment plan is you can, most treatment plants, if I were to guess, the average age of a treatment plant in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is probably at least 50 years. So you have the opportunity to build something state of the art that operates very efficiently and can really be an environmental point of pride, honestly. And then the last thing we did just recently, 2 weeks ago, one of the state of the art treatment processes we're looking at is it's called Aqua Narita. There's right around 20 installations in the United States. That's how new and state of the art the process is. They have a plant similar in size to what the authority is considering in Wolcott, Kansas City. So members of the board, members of the operations staff, members of the engineering team flew out to Kansas and looked at that plant, had a project seminar, learned a lot about the process, and brought back a lot of great ideas that we think would be beneficial if this were to happen in Newtown. The authority has requested proposals from 2 financial advisors with significant experience in municipal financing and engaged the services of PFM Financial Advisors, which is one of the biggest municipal financial advisors in the Commonwealth. And then there is an existing service agreement with Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority and a supplemental agreement related to the Neshaminy Interceptor, which is the line that runs along the west side of the township. There is negotiations associated with that agreement and what the authority's potential obligations would be to that. In terms of next steps, there was a kickoff meeting with the financial advisor to provide a lot more detail on costs and potential schedule for the project. And the financial advisor is going to be charged with developing short and long-term alternatives to finance a project of this magnitude. And then from an engineering perspective, as I said, we did a preliminary evaluation based on that sampling that we did and came up with what we call a preliminary design report and cost estimate. And the next step would be to kind of refine that a little more, get a little more into detailed design, the zoning evaluation, land development process. Obviously, I don't have to tell anybody here about that process. We would want to get through at least the preliminary land development approval process at this stage. And then potential environmental impacts. The site is vacant, it would be a greenfield. A first installation on that site requires some environmental due diligence. And then basically continued coordination, cooperation with our regulators to get guidance from them on what they would like to see in the project. And the Bucks County agreement is one of the last items. So that's kind of a high level summary. I hope we didn't take too much of your time. Obviously, this would involve a change to the Act 537. The sewage planning process is a borough and a township process. Right now, that Act 537 planning, the state planning for how you manage your sewage, obviously includes the regional system as part of that. So a change to your Act 537 plan would be a part of the process going forward. Not yet, we're not there yet, but we would obviously work with the borough and the township as that. Anybody has any questions? I'm happy to answer them best I can.
Council, Michelle, Brad?
Early on, you talked about additional rate increases.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how much the next, like, the 3 to 5 year increases are going to be?
So I can tell you that the plot, I won't get it exactly right, but they run somewhere around 15 to 25%.
Each year or over?
Not if, no, I want to say there's, that cost projection includes 15% in years, maybe 3, 4. At those times where you're double dipping, paying bucks, paying. And then after that, it's hard to project costs, but we project the O&M costs for the plant and some other things and anticipate maybe a 5% increase every 5 years, one every 5 years, long term. Once we get through the initial, capital cost to establish rates to cover the debt rates. But I believe and I think, I don't know if I mentioned that here, but a rate analyst is a piece of this too, where we think as we take these next steps and the authority meets with their financial advisor, a rate analyst to give options for how to best manage any rate increases and soften them to impact to the ratepayers as best we can.
And my other question is there any grant funding that's available for this kind of project?
We're going to pursue grant funding. There is infrastructure funding available. We're hoping some green environmental, we have to have a project on paper to a certain level to sit down with a lot of those. WIFIA, we've looked at WIFIA, which is primarily a low interest loan program. Penvest offers low interest loan and grant funds. The demographics of this area don't typically lend themselves to grants from Penvest. But the environmental green piece of thing, I'm hoping we could get a little creative, and look for some funding there, even if it's just a portion of the cost.
This design, I think we spoke to the supervisors for the township a couple months back. And they said they went out and saw a site. So is this design, they're still talking about a state-of-the-art, looks like a barn type thing with a
Yeah.
silo and.
Yeah, as part of that preliminary land development process, we can produce renderings. You can architecturally, you can do anything. Obviously, you want to manage costs, right? We want it to appear nice, but it's going to be state of the art from an operations standpoint. You build a plant at this point in time, it just doesn't happen a lot. Most plants, even that get construction work done, it's retrofits, it's upgrades. You don't get the opportunity to build a brand new plant. So architecturally, you can do whatever you want. It's just a matter of how much money.
Right, I only ask because I'm sure people may be saying, well, where is this going and how close to my house is it?
Sure, that's definitely, matter of fact, I think, Warren spoke to when the previous plant was decommissioned, about 10 or 11 years ago. The authority looked at building a plant, because cost, that was like right around that 9.4% increase over 10 years. The authority looked at building a plant on the property where it used to own. And it just was not conducive because it was too close to residents. Part of I do believe the aqua sale is really what shook everybody to think, we need to think long-term and be prepared and control our own destiny a little better. But the land availability of this, it's an almost 18 acre parcel right next to the new Wawa. It really, there's maybe 1 or 2 houses within 700-800 feet, am I right?
Well,
And they're Middletown.
And
we're Middletown, Newtown.
yeah, and so it's a really, you don't get opportunities with a minimal impact to residents, piece of property very often in this area, right? Anywhere, not just Newtown, anywhere, Bucks, Montgomery County. So that was part of the reason really to advance it. It was an opportunity that we didn't know how long that land may or may not be available. But I'm residential, I think that, again, these next steps will be big on all of that, on architectural renderings, on presentations at meetings where we can show you what we think at this point it would look like. That would all be part of the next step of the process.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay, moving on to the engineer's report. Michelle?
Hello, thank you. I have two items that I propose for your agenda next week. Both of them have to do with the MICBA development located at